and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 131. And the title of this episode is Scare Tactics, Bribes, and Assassinations All Failed. On to Plan Y. And we will get into that in this report. And let's start off with the economic collapse news. We're going to head over to Greece, and we see in Greece that unemployment is rising rapidly, especially with the youths, and it has hit a new record high of 65%. Now, among the nation there, the unemployment rate hit a new high of 27.6%, up from 26.9% in April. But from ages 15 to 24, the unemployment went from 57.5 all the way up to 64.9%. And what does that mean? Only 35% of the youths are actually working in Greece, and the employment of the whole nation is approaching 30% already. And that just goes to show you how bad it is over in Greece. And what happened was in one of the villages in Greece, I think it was a village of Archanes in Iraklio, and tax collectors came in. A team of inspectors from the Financial Crime Squad was heckled by the villagers and told them to leave. They came to collect taxes, and they were forced out of the village. Again, with more and more people hitting hard times and more people not bringing in revenue, the government, of course, is not receiving the revenue, and they've already spent 75% of the bailout money. They need to go send out squads to get these taxes. Now, if you're in a situation where you're unemployed, would you give your taxes to a collapsing government who is probably so corrupt at this point, or would you keep the money to survive on and to provide for your family? Well, I would keep the money to provide for my family. And we see this happening in Greece, where the unemployment is getting so high that people are starting to hoard their money, and instead of paying taxes, they're going to use it for food, for water, for whatever they need to use it for, because they have no other income coming in. Now, in Greece, they also want to they want to start confiscating the people's homes. Prime Minister and New Democracy conservative leader Samaras, again, to lift a ban prohibiting banks from confiscating homes worth more than 200,000 euros of Greeks who can't afford to pay their mortgages because of daunting austerity measures. The idea of lifting the ban, which is set to expire at the end of the year, is making it so they can take this money and use it for the banks. With banks suffering more than 27% default rate on loans because of austerity measures, many Greeks are unable to pay, and they're demanding they be allowed to repossess homes to help them recapitalize their coffers. So what they're doing is they want to start collecting these homes because there's no employment, and for the government to receive more debt, they have to let go another 25,000 government jobs, and I think it's 12,500 now, and then to receive more of the money, it's another 12,500. And all these people out of work, they can't pay their mortgage. This is they have no other place to live, and the banks are not receiving mortgage payments because the houses are in foreclosure. They want to start taking these homes because they have no other funds coming into the banks. And this, again, a country that has debt upon debt upon debt cannot survive without real revenue coming in to pay for the interest on this debt. And this is why we see the Greek government continually needing a bailout. And if we look back in time, if everyone can remember, they only told us that, Greece only needs this one bailout, just like AIG only needed the one bailout. And that is never the case. They always need more than what they say. And now, how many bailouts have Greece had so far? Quite a few, and it's getting worse and worse. And they're even asking some of the investors to write off some of this debt because they know that Greece can't pay it. But the central bankers don't care because they really want the natural resources of the country. That's what they're trying to get. Now, here in the U.S., with unemployment, I know, the fake unemployment numbers, the fake housing numbers, the fake inflation numbers, the fake GDP numbers, all calculations have been changed. Everything's being pumped up to make everyone believe that everything is great and okay. And what we're seeing now is 3 million Americans who have been unemployed for more than 52 weeks. And this is reported from the Wall Street Journal. And what they're saying is that since they've been unemployed so long, they will probably never work again. And once you're out of work, you lose your skills. It looks bad on your resume that you've been out of work for over a year, and employers are less likely to choose you for a job compared to someone who has been unemployed for maybe 2 weeks, 3 months, or someone who's just coming off another job and starting a job. So it's going to be very tough for these people to find work. Okay. Now, American Eagle silver bullion sales continue to shatter records. Sales of the U.S. Mint American Eagle coins experienced their best July ever with a whopping 93.4% increase over July of 2012. And what this means is people are purchasing precious metals as their insurance policy because they realize that the economy is not getting better, that all these numbers that we see are fake. All these numbers are manipulated to make people believe that everything is okay. And let me just say this. Precious metals are an insurance policy against the dollar collapsing, the economy collapsing, because precious metal has held its value over time, and it keeps up with inflation. It keeps up with whatever is going on in the economy. And if you take a piece of silver that was 10,000 years old, or you took a paper note that was 10,000 years old, maybe not that far back, maybe let's go 1,000 years back, the silver would still have value where the paper would have no value whatsoever. And the Fed, the central bankers, they all know this. China knows this. Russia knows this. All these nations that are hoarding the precious metal right now, they know the real value of the metal. The central bankers know, and that's why they have been pushing the price of precious metal down so they can acquire it, and central banks have been acquiring quite a bit of precious metals. Now, retailers are seeing a slow start to back-to-school season. Usually this is a pretty big time for like Office Max, Office Depot, Costco. And right now, retailers are reporting a slow start to the critical back-to-school shopping season, and shoppers focused on discounted summer merchandise, but held off on picking up new fall clothing in an uncertain economy. Revenue at stores open at least a year, an industry measure of retailers' health, rose 3.8% in July, the slowest pace since March, according to a preliminary tally of 10 retailers by the International Council of Shopping Centers. Costco Wholesale Corp was among the retailers posting disappointing figures at this point. So, but this is not the only thing that we're seeing. We're also seeing many retail stores closing. And if you look around, and especially, in my area, I look around, I see strip malls of empty space. I see once where there was a Staples, now there is no Staples. and the entire plaza is pretty much completely empty. And if you look around at many of the plazas across the country, you will find that many of them are empty or close to being empty. And this is just showing you that stores are closing down. People are not going out and spending their money like they used to, and we're seeing this all over the place. Where the USA Today reported this back in February or so, and it was Best Buy, Radio Shack, GameStop. They were closing hundreds and hundreds of stores, laying off many people. Again, an economy that is recovering, that is doing well, where people have disposable income, they go out and they purchase. But now people credit have been hurt, so they can't use their credit cards. They're making less money, so they don't have the cash to go out and purchase these goods. So guess what happens? Retail hurts. That is what goes on. And then people switch over to wholesale or cheaper places where they can buy their things, like Costco Warehouse, the dollar store. And then all of a sudden, when they can't even pay for those things, or they're only buying the minimum there, those places start to hurt, and it's a cascading effect that we're seeing. Now, let's go to the housing market. Now, if the housing market is really doing as well as the mainstream media and the government is saying, why do they need so many programs to pump the housing market up? Why doesn't the Fed just stop buying all the toxic real estate from the banks? Why don't the banks just disclose, instead of hiding, all the foreclosures they have on their books? Why don't they just do this? Why does the government have to come up with no down payment type of programs? Why do they have to come up with programs that are like HARP, tax credits for the first-time homebuyers, fraud closures, forgiveness, trillions of dollars injected into artificially suppressed interest rates, bailouts of banks? Why do they need to do this? They even tried to pump up the real estate market. We're giving special treatment to hedge funds and investors to buy up the housing market for and try to re-rent these homes to people. And this report goes on to say, while the Federal Reserve and the current administration have tried a litany of programs to jumpstart the housing market, nothing has worked as well as the REO to rent program, with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the banks loaded with delinquent and vacant properties. The idea was to sell huge blocks of properties to institutional investors to be put out as rentals. And this is why you see Fannie and Freddie, they're reporting that they're doing so well, but they're really not. It's all these institutional investors buying up blocks and blocks of these homes, hoping to spur a housing recovery, trying to pump up the market, trying to rent out these homes, and it's all failing. And this is why they're using these fake numbers to make everyone think that the housing market is starting to move up. And let me tell you, you see all over the mainstream media of these people flipping homes. They're not owning homes. They're trying to make a fast buck on what has been done by the Fed, the institutional investors, and the government. So now people, here we are. This is a repeat of 2008. Prior to 2008, where people were in there flipping, no down payment, people taking out arms. Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, doing most of these loans and all of this stuff. We're seeing a complete repeat. This is what we're seeing. That is it. That's the facts. That is all. And listen, for those who are questioning this or this, go buy a house. Hold on to it. Let me know how that goes. Because if you believed Bernanke, if you believed the government back in 2007, guess what would have happened? Some prime is contained. That's our indicator. The Fed and the government are not predicting a recession. Now, he said this in 2008 when the recession happened. Guess what? If you believed the government and the mainstream media at this point in time, and you went out and you bought the house, you bought it at the height of the market. And guess what happened in a couple months later? You lost everything. Your down payment, you're underwater, and you bought at the height. And there are so many people that are still underwater because they believed what the government officials and the indicators and all the stats that the government and everyone was pushing out. Everyone believed it and got screwed. America lost 38% of their wealth during this period. Okay, now let's move on to Obamacare. Now, Obamacare, there's something interesting that happened here. Part-time. Now, you know how everyone is making everyone's hours less, putting everyone into part-time because businesses were afraid that they were going to have to provide health insurance under this new Obamacare, and then Obamacare. The government came out and said, okay, we're going to deny. We're going to push off this mandate that businesses have to comply with this part of the law. But it turns out that if you have a part-time worker, all the hours are added up, and they calculate out how many full-time people you actually have. And what happens here is that, let's say Company X has 40 full-time employees working 40 hours per week, along with 20 part-time employees working 15 hours per week. The 20 part-time employees are counted as 10 full-time equivalent employees. So really, the company has 50 full-time employees, not 40. So they're adding up the hours, and now they're telling you that you have this many. Yes, it's still less, but it's not what the businesses thought it was going to be, and they're just going to be starting adding up all these part-time employees. What I don't understand with this is who actually gets the health insurance of the 20 part-time. You just choose? So far, this is unclear. But we have to think of it this way. The real people of America will not get bailed out like President Obama did for the staffers in the government who complained that the premiums were so high that they had to pay $5,000 for a single person and $11,000 for a family. And if they didn't pay, they would be penalized with a tax because they didn't take an insurance. So you're screwed if you do, you're screwed if you don't. Obamacare is not for the people because, again, if something is good for the people, you do not have to penalize people. You do not have to sell it to the people. It would be good as it stands, but this is not good as it stands. Now, Meredith Whitney came out today saying that Wall Street is going to cut 15% of its jobs over 18 months. And she goes on to say here, we are on the precipice of a seismic downsizing on Wall Street, the likes of which have never occurred before. Whitney says the financial sector is set to see layoffs of up to 100,000 or as much as 15% of the workforce in the next 18 months as banks contract and muddle through sluggish economy. Several banks have already announced layoffs in the last months, including J.P. Morgan, which plans in February to cut 17,000 jobs, including about 4,000 this year. Bank of America announced 16,000 layoffs in September. HSB announced 14,000 layoffs in May. Citigroup announced 11,000 layoffs in December. And critics say it's not a secret the industry has contracted in the last several years since the financial crisis. And to argue that this is something new, you have to be sleeping for the last 5 years. We are in a downturn in the economy, and we are seeing this play out. And something with this tapering which I personally don't think the Fed is actually going to taper. I think they're going to say they're going to taper, and they're going to blame this on another event, just when the economy was about to turn over and really pick up steam, and they're going to blame it on something else in the fall that makes the economy collapse, which will be part one of the collapse. Okay. Now, there was a report out there that said the Middle East expert U.S.-Egypt alliance on the verge of collapse. Now, what's happening is we're seeing this throughout the Middle East where people of these countries are rebelling. They do not like who is in control, which is most of these countries are the U.S., Israel, and the central bankers, and they want them out completely. And what's happening now, Egypt, Tunisia, and Yemen, all the Bahrain in Saudi Arabia, right near Saudi Arabia, are having Libya is another one, having major problems with the people now speaking out and protesting and wanting a government change. And this is very disturbing, and the U.S. government, Israel, and central bankers do not like what's going on, and they're losing control of the Middle East right now. And this is why, one, the terrorist threat of the Middle East with closing all the embassies and removing all the U.S. citizens from these places, because they are expecting to do some type of clean sweep war or something to regain control. Now, during this time, U.S. Air Force Chief ends secret week-long visit to Israel. The Chief of Staff of the U.S. Air Force, General Mark A. Welsh, has ended his week-long trip to Israel with the White House. Now, the main focus there on this secret mission that nobody can know about is that they met and they talked about Iran, Syria, and now Egypt. So we're seeing this all come together, and something is going to happen. And now they're coming out and they're using the same propaganda that Iran has a new rocket site, that they've seen this from satellite photos, and it looks like a launch pad where they can mount missiles and even put nuclear warheads on top that could reach the U.S. or Israel, and we should be very concerned about this. Now, we have to think back. Wait a minute, they used this story before in 2004. Then Secretary of State Colin Powell tells reporter that Iran had been working on technology to fit a nuclear warhead onto a missile. They're using the same tactic. And wait, they used this before again. Iraq, where they had satellite photos of weapons of mass destruction, and the U.S. forces went in there. Oh, that's right, there were none. So they're using the same propaganda over and over and over to try to sell this to the American people, and it just isn't working anymore. No one believes. Now, during this whole time, the United States knows that they cannot march in to Syria or Iran because of Russia and China backing them, and this has been going on for a very long time. So, what does, under the cover of night, the U.S. do? They have U.S.-controlled Saudi Arabia try to bribe Russia to back off of Syria and not support Syria if, well, let's just say the U.S. invades. Well, Putin didn't go for the bribe. He didn't take it. Syria and Russia have been friends for a very long time. They have deals together. So this plan of bribing them didn't work. Now, we have to remember yesterday the CIA deputy director came out and said, that their biggest concern and their threat is if al-Qaeda takes control of the government in Syria And the U.S. doesn't have the ability to place a government in Syria if something happens to Assad. Now, it just so happens that al-Qaeda shot missiles at Assad's motorcade and tried to assassinate him. But the attempt didn't work. Assad is okay. So we can see where this is playing out, because if they were able to assassinate Assad, they could say al-Qaeda now is in charge of the government, which will allow the U.S. and Israel to go in under this terrorist warning and flush out the remaining al-Qaeda terrorists. And this will give them the opportunity to go into Syria to help flush out terrorists. And while they're in there, set up a Western central bank and make the US dollar the reserve currency, which will then give them a path to Iran. And they were hoping they were able to do this, and maybe they'll try another attempt. And I said this yesterday, that they might attempt an assassination on Assad, and it just so happens that today they did try. But they might try this again, because they're trying everything they can. And this is why I said, it's time for Plan Y, because they've used up all the other plans. They tried the chemical weapons of mass destruction. They tried the humanitarian route. They tried bribing. They tried, Syria and Iran are creating nuclear type of weapons and missiles, and they're trying everything, and nothing is working. Okay, let's move on here. Now, Amash is trying to reintroduce his bill to restrict the NSA from collecting and spying on the American people. And it looks like Congress is really kept in the dark, and every time he asks for something, for documents and things like that, I'll just read. Amash said members of the intelligence committees were aware of the full extent of surveillance, but I think rank and file members, yes, there was an effort to keep information from us. And he even said one time they asked for some information, a classified document, when it was going to be made available, and they pretty much announced it just one day before through an unusual channel, so Amash would not recognize that the document was released, but they found out just in time where the document was, and they were able to get it. And you can see that they're trying to keep this from Amash, and they do not want this bill passed, because this spying has absolutely nothing to do with protecting Americans from terrorists. It's about blackmailing officials. It's about learning what the banks and the investors are doing. It's about stealing patents from people who are creating new devices and things like that want to get these things patented. It's about creating a list of those people who are going to be a problem during an economic collapse. It's about those people who have weapons that might oppose the government and might want to replace the government during this period. They need to know who they are, where they are, and as soon as everything falls apart, it will be time to declare martial law and to collect these people. This is what the spying is all about. It has nothing to do with anything else. And they're just really angry and pissed off that Snowden came out and told on them that they were violating the Fourth Amendment, that they were criminals, that they were traitors to America and to the people who put them there. And they were trying to switch this around and say that Snowden is the traitor. But who are the people that are violating the Fourth Amendment, who've taken oaths to support and protect the Constitution? These are the people that have violated the people who put them in these positions. The people are the power, they are not. And the Constitution was put into place so that people would always retain the power of who they want and who they need to throw out of the government who do not work for the people. And to take this one step further, counter-terror experts saying that the government mass surveillance program doesn't work and it doesn't keep us safe. Top security experts say the mass spying doesn't keep us safe. The NSA spying did not prevent terror attack on Wall Street. Um, while the government initially claimed the mass surveillance on Americans prevented more than 50 terror attacks, the NSA Deputy Director John Inglis walked that position back all the way to saying that at most one plot might have been disrupted. We don't really know from all this information, and no, it didn't lead to last week's tip about a new terror threat. AP reports, because then again, what army, military faction, terrorist would get on a cell phone or a regular phone or type in an email and say, hey, listen, what are you doing today? Maybe we should go and bomb a couple places and commit terror. They are not using that type of communication. Please, that is ridiculous. And this report goes on to say that the mass spying creates an easy mark for hackers because, spying on regular people and asking internet sites and telecommunication sites to have backdoor openings so the NSA can go in and just spy on the people. Well, those backdoors can be manipulated and used for everyday hackers to sneak inside and steal all your data. And it's a very big security breach. Now, there was another report about cyber attacks drilling down into the financial system, and this is the newest threat that is out. Cyber attacks represent one of the newest threats to financial stability and are rising up the agenda for exchanges and other market infrastructure providers. And, they're trying to get through this, but with this new threat that's happening, it's making it more and more difficult. And this goes on to say Mark Clancy, Managing Director of Technology Risk Management, told Financial News, if you look, attacks on the financial sector historically, they are usually motivated by fraud. But what we have seen, particularly in the last year, are mainly motivations to disrupt or destroy the banking financial infrastructure. We are concerned about where these events take us in the future. We are calling for the industry-wide action on this issue. And what they've been saying is DDoS attacks have been unrelenting and are getting more sophisticated by the day. Financial institutions are spending more and more of their resources in an attempt to ward off these attacks. And these attacks are trying to push into the systems to either destroy or to manipulate the data in banking and financial institutions, or to steal the digital money that is there in the banks. And this is what's starting to happen. And again, these cyber attacks that we are seeing might be coupled with the part one of the collapse, where they can say, if they're on to plan Y here, if they can't get into Syria, Syria might have, the Syria cyber attack force might hit the banks on Wall Street, where they have to declare a bank holiday. And in another report I did, there was a cyber attack on the trading systems and on the stock market, and bringing that down to its knees could help the U.S. government and the Fed to say the economy was just about to turn around, and look what happened. The Syria-backed cyber attack force attacked the banks, attacked Wall Street and the stock market, and now we were just about, to have the economy really go full steam ahead, and we're seeing a collapse. The market is crashing. There's a bank holiday. To save these banks, we have to do bail-ins. and we can't allow people to take out their money. But don't worry, the government and the Fed are doing everything in their power to help the situation. The Fed has decided they will increase the amount of QE, and now we will be getting 170 billion per month to help out the situation. We are now declaring war with Syria because of this attack, going back to Panetta and to Hagel and to Janet Napolitano. And I think it was President Obama also, any cyber attack on the U.S. is an act of war, and this will allow them to do an act of war on Syria and help them get into and start the war in Syria. And this could be a possible scenario. Now, Obama thinks Americans don't need to know much, and he likes to keep everyone in the dark, especially, the government. They're not transparent at all. And here are just a couple things. The administration claims the right to target Americans suspected of terrorism for death by drone strike, but it's resisted revealing the legal memorandum explaining under what circumstances and by what authority. Well, they don't want to reveal that because there is none. The current debate over the NSA's call records dragnet also involves secret law, specifically a classified interpretation of the Patriot Act, broad enough to make every American's call data relevant to terrorism investigations. For several years now, the Obama administration has been building secret drone bases throughout Africa and the Arabian Peninsula in order to wage war against al-Qaeda and its associated forces. Who are those associated forces? Sorry, that's classified too. The Department of Defense, because elements that might be considered associated forces can build credibility by being listed as such by the United States, we have classified the list. So you can't even see the list of what the associated forces are. 2 weeks ago, the House and Senate Intelligence Committees quietly approved shifting CIA funds to the administration's covert military aid program for Syrian rebels. 70% of Americans want to stay out of Syria, and this was there was a Pew's poll, and Congress and Americans do not want to go into Syria, but Vice President Joe Biden and Secretary of State John Kerry shored up wobbly legislation by stressing the need for U.S. skin in the game. And conveniently, they didn't have to convince too many. Obama opted to approve the program as a CIA covert action, the Washington Post explained, in order to avoid the need for wider congressional approval. And we're seeing this over and over again. This is why we have, in part, this terrorist threat over there, so they have the ability to do strikes without talking or getting the approval from Congress. And this is a good one. When asked how Dianne Feinstein voted on the Syria committee on how she voted with Syria, she replied, "It's classified, so we're not allowed to even know how she voted." And this goes on to say, you may think that Americans have a right to know who we're at war with when the government thinks it can kill them, and whether the executive branch considers the personal data of all Americans relevant to terrorism investigations. But this administration begs to differ. As far as it's concerned, you can't handle the truth. Listen, everyone, I want to thank everyone for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.